Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
As Ivan made his move, the entire racetrack audience fell into a panic. The originally lively scene instantly became even more chaotic. The organizers, realizing what was happening, immediately began calling for support. The experienced commentator, watching the events unfold, was rendered speechless. He had been in this profession for many years, but he had never seen a scene like this. At this moment, Pepper and Happy, watching the race, grew even more flustered as they saw Tony, in second place, charging towards Ivan. As Tony's longtime bodyguard, Happy immediately came up with a plan. "There's a suit in the car. We need to find a way to get it to him." Hearing Happy's words, the capable Pepper also reacted and followed Happy's pace. At the same time, Black Widow, who was constantly observing the track, also changed her expression. "Su, where are you?" Hearing Black Widow's question, Su Xing, hidden in the crowd, replied, "Don't worry, I'm watching from the side. If anything happens, I'll act immediately." Hearing Su Xing's words, Black Widow's heart settled slightly. After years of dealing with various situations, one thing was for sure. She had witnessed Su Xing's strength. As long as Su Xing wasn't off duty, he had the ability to handle this situation. Yes, as long as he wasn't off duty. Wait, not off duty. Noticing this detail, Black Widow's heart, which had just settled, tightened again. At this distance, if something really happened, she wouldn't be able to get there in time. At this crucial moment, he absolutely couldn't be off duty. Realizing the problem, Black Widow was now desperate to know what time it was. The usually composed Black Widow appeared somewhat disheveled at this moment. Meanwhile, as the first-place race car was attacked and completely immobilized on the side, Tony, who was originally in second place, instantly became serious as he saw the situation before him. Looking at the somewhat dazed Ivan ahead, Tony's brain instantly analyzed the current situation. Under these circumstances, the best plan would definitely be to stop the car immediately and not get any closer. But this was a race. Not to mention whether a high-speed race car could stop before reaching him. Even if it did stop, what about the cars behind it? Could they all stop one by one? Thinking of this, Tony gritted his teeth, adjusted his direction, and floored the accelerator. Under these circumstances, only by passing by Ivan was there a glimmer of hope. With the roar of the engine, Tony got closer and closer to Ivan. And just as Tony's race car was about to overtake the man in front of him, who was holding a weapon and seemed dazed, Ivan also snapped out of his confusion and focused his gaze back on Tony. Although a bit bewildered, Ivan, who always remembered his goal, successfully intercepted Tony. Looking at the suddenly accelerating Tony, Ivan sneered, instantly seeing through Tony's intention. If it were anyone else, Tony's plan would have succeeded. But unfortunately, as a genius, he could control this distance with his eyes closed. Ivan raised his hand and whipped it to the side. Tony's pupils constricted. At this distance, at this speed, the whip would almost certainly land on his car. Seeing Tony's panicked eyes, Ivan's smile returned to his face. What had just happened must have been because he had been too focused lately, causing his attention to scatter a bit. It was normal not to see things clearly. But this time, whether his eyes were playing tricks on him or not, this whip would definitely hit Tony. No reason. Because this was physics. Tony, who had also calculated it, was even more flustered. At this speed, he was almost certain to be hit. He didn't want to know what it felt like for this attack to land on him. As the whip fell, Tony, who was experiencing it from a first-person perspective and sweating profusely from anxiety, suddenly felt something was off. His car seemed to have been pulled back just now. Tony's wide eyes instantly filled with great confusion. No. How was this possible? Did the world's operation have a bug? Had the map not loaded yet? As a whip fell, the whip that was originally aimed at Tony, just like the previous car, was struck on its front. Ivan, wielding his weapon, also had wide eyes filled with great confusion. What was going on? Had the fatigue of this period caused his calculations to go awry? This wasn't right, was it? In Ivan's bewildered gaze, the car, like the previous one, flipped once in the air and landed on the ground. Ivan, subconsciously analyzing reality, his brain suddenly froze. This How could the position I struck and the way he was hit possibly be connected? Even if Newton himself came, he couldn't do this, could he? At this moment, Su Xing, hidden in the crowd, was almost laughing uncontrollably. If he hadn't been unable to solve that force analysis problem during his exams back then, he wouldn't have ended up in that company. He wouldn't have suffered so many years for nothing. Well, this was good. It could be considered providing solid real-world evidence that could disprove Newtonian mechanics. Su Xing, in his mental victory, satisfactorily controlled the car. Before Ivan could finish analyzing the current situation in his mind, the remaining race cars also swarmed towards him. Ivan, in a state of bewilderment, could only turn his head to look at the cars approaching him. Ivan swung his two whips on the ground, and two marks immediately appeared on the ground. And just as Ivan was about to make his move, the approaching cars suddenly turned, horizontally stopping their cars in place, forcefully bringing them to a halt. And that wasn't all. Under Ivan's disbelieving gaze, the cars that followed also stopped one by one in place, using the exact same method as the first one. Tony, who climbed out of his car, was utterly shocked to see this perfectly uniform scene. No way. Are all of your driving skills this good? How did you all stop? Did I only leave the racing world for a few years? Are the current drivers' skills this outrageous? And Ivan, watching all of this unfold, was no less shocked than Tony behind him. The action of swinging the whip in his hand also stopped. Although there wasn't much physical exertion, seeing the scene before him, Ivan visibly turned red with anger. How the hell was this possible? Do you think this is a Tom and Jerry cartoon? You can stop wherever you want. If you can stop like this, why don't you just stop racing? You might as well fly into the sky and race planes. Ivan, holding his weapon, suddenly felt that reality was a bit unreal. If this kind of situation could happen, then the question arose, how were his weapons even made? Ivan, who had come for revenge, suddenly felt a flicker of confusion in his heart. Father, physics no longer exists. And just then, Black Widow looked at the watch on her wrist. She breathed a sigh of relief. Good. It wasn't time to get off work yet. There was still plenty of time. On the highway, several police cars sped towards the racetrack. All the police officers felt a little uneasy. If only they could be faster. Who knew what the racetrack had become by now? The man with the strange weapon, as the caller described, wouldn't have caused irreversible damage, would he? At the same time, at the racetrack, Ivan's two whips lay on the ground, and he looked at the neatly arranged race cars in front of him, questioning his life. The audience in the stands was terrified by the sudden turn of events. In this situation, apart from those involved, no one had the leisure to consider whether this conformed to the laws of physics. At this moment, they only wanted to escape the scene quickly. On the track, a somewhat disheveled Tony climbed out of the car, recovering from his initial panic. Looking at Ivan, who was shirtless with a similar arc reactor on his chest, Tony's now calm mind suddenly recalled what Su Xing had said. You are currently in absolute danger. A man whose intelligence might be on par with yours is trying to kill you out of hatred. Tony gasped for air, regulating his breathing. An absolutely dangerous man. Could it be him? At this moment, Ivan also turned around, his face still showing a hint of bewilderment. Tony looked at the arc reactor on his chest, further confirming his suspicion. Since this was true, then, could the reason Su Xing gave also be true? Did his father really exile Ivan's father? Before Tony could think further, Ivan looked at the somewhat flustered Tony and directly swung his whips at him. Seeing the whips coming, Tony reacted quickly, rolling over to dodge the attack. The energy-releasing whips left a deep mark on the smooth track. Seeing Tony dodge the attack, Ivan gritted his teeth and continued to swing his whips, attacking. Although he had a momentary doubt about physics. But what needed to be done still had to be done. In any case, at least the arc reactor on his chest was still supplying energy, and his weapons were still lethal enough to eliminate Tony in front of him. Even if the whole world went crazy, he would still fulfill his father's last wish and destroy the Stark family. As the whips swung, Tony, in his racing suit, once again narrowly avoided the attack. Seeing Tony's panic dodging, Ivan's face showed a smug smile. Indeed, his weapons were still effective, and the Stark family's fate should end now. And at this moment, The smug Ivan had no idea that a blue-purple hand had already been placed on the arc reactor on his chest. Su Xing, among the crowd, was watching this scene unfold. To outsiders, Tony's several dodges seemed like he was playing with his life. But what they didn't know was that if Ivan's whip truly hit Tony, the arc reactor on his chest would instantly fail. That falling whip would also become harmless due to the loss of energy. And under Platinum Star's speed, whether that whip could even land on Tony was an unknown. Looking at Ivan's arrogant smile, Su Xing, through a straw, sipped a cup of coffee he had snagged from the chaotic crowd. Controlling the situation, Su Xing exhaled comfortably. How wonderful would it be if future work intensity was always like this? However, with Thor's arrival, the first major event, Loki's invasion, should follow. For self-preservation, Platinum Star's ability might be enough. But facing such world-destroying spectacles, Platinum Star was a bit insufficient. Thinking about future scenarios, Su Xing's sense of urgency rose again. It doesn't matter. As long as he could get the Goro Goro no Mi, glint glint fruit, everything would be fine. Just then, Black Widow's voice came through the earpiece, interrupting Su Xing's calculations. Su, how's the situation on your end? Feeling the urgency in her voice, Su Xing drank his coffee and replied, "The situation is fine. I'm ready to act at any moment." Your idea of being ready, is that referring to drinking coffee and just watching without moving? Hearing the questioning tone in Black Widow's voice, Su Xing turned his head. As expected, among the crowd, Black Widow, disguised as Pepper's secretary, was glaring at him through the crowd. Su Xing, being monitored by Black Widow, took another sip of coffee. Facing Black Widow's even fiercer expression, Su Xing quickly said into the earpiece, "Don't worry, you should have some confidence in my strength. Besides, I spill blood for the safety of the people, so I should get a little reward, right? Just consider it a benefit from S.H.I.E.L.D. Listening to Su Xing's words in the earpiece, a hint of helplessness flashed in the depths of Black Widow's eyes. Another crooked logic. Watching Su Xing drink coffee without any psychological burden, Black Widow somehow felt a bit embarrassed. You are an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. What kind of behavior is this? Next time you go out on a mission, don't say you're from S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm afraid it will lower S.H.I.E.L.D's standing and mine." Just as Black Widow was about to urge Su Xing to take action, Su Xing's voice sounded in her ear again. "No rush, Iron Man is about to come online. Once the mission is complete, Tony will be our colleague, so it's good to get acquainted." Listening to Su Xing's voice, Black Widow also noticed Tony's luxury car. Under Happy's skilled control, that luxury car, worth tens of millions of US dollars, directly rammed into Ivan. Then Happy quickly reversed the car and came to Tony's side. "Sir, promise me, you won't play race car again, okay? It's always like this, it's very dangerous." Listening to Happy's joke, Tony tilted his head. "Watch your words. I was going to give you a raise." Hearing this, Happy immediately changed his tune. "Don't worry, sir. I will come to save you every time." Meanwhile, Pepper in the back seat threw Tony's portable armor over, interrupting their banter. "I don't understand how you two can still joke at a time like this." At this moment, Ivan also recovered from the impact. If it weren't for the armor protection, that hit just now would have probably wiped him out. Taking a breath, Ivan's gaze once again fixed on Tony. At the same time, seeing Ivan get up, Tony stopped wasting words, and with a light kick, the armor, like a small suitcase, immediately began to transform. Tony bent down, placing his hands in the grooves. Then he stood up, and the metal armor, like scales, adhered to Tony's arms. The technologically advanced armor gradually covered his entire body. As the faceplate lowered, covering Tony's face, the originally panicked audience immediately erupted in enthusiastic cheers. Watching Ivan approach, Tony raised his leg and kicked the car carrying Happy and Pepper, sending it away from the combat zone. And at this moment, Su Xing also blended into the cheering audience. "Great! It's Iron Man, we are saved." Outside the racetrack, the called-in reinforcements had arrived. Due to the incident involving a number of business tycoons, including Tony Stark, the speed of the reinforcements had greatly increased. The armed forces arrived at the scene, immediately got out of their vehicles, and rushed towards the racetrack. Presumably, People are already waiting for our rescue. However, before the armed forces could enter, the roaring cheers of the spectators assaulted their ears. It's Iron Man. We're saved. This is awesome. This race was so worth watching. I get to see Iron Man transform and fight criminals right in front of me. Is this real? Even if I die now, the ticket was worth it. The armed forces then turned their attention to the racetrack. Watching Tony in his armor, Ivan spat out the toothpick in his mouth. Seeing Ivan make a move, Tony immediately aimed his palm repulsor at him. However, before the energy could fully charge, Ivan swiftly swung his whips, interrupting Tony's charge. Then another whip struck Tony's chest. Seeing Tony suffer successive heavy blows, Ivan's smile returned to his face. His armor heavily damaged, Tony looked at the various data popping up and quickly replanned his combat strategy in his mind. Seeing Ivan's whip strike again, Tony simply went with the flow, letting the whip wrap around his neck. Then, with his right hand, he grabbed the energy-charged weapon and, using his strength, pulled Ivan directly towards himself. Temporarily losing one weapon, Ivan could only swing the whip in his right hand at Tony. But Ivan was not good at close-quarters combat. His combat skills were far from being able to compensate for his equipment disadvantage. The restrained Ivan only delayed his defeat. He watched helplessly as Tony got close, delivering 2 punches, one of which was a liver blow. Ivan, losing control of his body from the pain, was then directly flipped and slammed to the ground by Tony. Tony won the battle amidst the cheers of the surrounding spectators. Looking at Ivan, who had lost his combat ability and lay on the ground unable to resist, Tony, in his armor, walked up and directly pulled off the arc reactor from his chest. Observing the device in his hand, Tony was somewhat in a daze. Not long ago, he had made a bold declaration at the hearing, claiming that his technology could not be surpassed by anyone within 20 years. And now, the arc reactor, a technology no less advanced than his own, was in his hand. Su Xing's words echoed in Tony's mind again. Is it a feud from our fathers? As the belated armed forces took control of the fallen Ivan, Tony directly crushed the arc reactor in his hand. Watching Ivan being led away, Tony, wearing his mask, locked onto the incapacitated Ivan. He wanted to thoroughly question what exactly was going on. In the stands, seeing Tony successfully resolve the situation, Black Widow also breathed a sigh of relief, her tense body finally relaxing. Just then, a hand touched Black Widow's shoulder from behind. Seeing Black Widow instinctively grab his wrist, Su Xing, who was about to make a move, quickly spoke up. It's me. Hearing the familiar voice, Black Widow finally relaxed. What are you doing here? Looking at Black Widow's puzzled face, Su Xing, who had changed back into a suit, pulled out a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. I'm just giving you another one of my business cards. Lest Tony can't reach me later. Putting away the business card, Black Widow became even more puzzled. Are you that confident? Su Xing, who had reached the exit, turned and looked at Black Widow. Just wait, he'll contact us voluntarily. Then he waved his hand and left the scene. Watching Su Xing's disappearing figure, Black Widow was filled with helplessness but could only cooperate and put away the business card. After resolving the matter, Su Xing walked out of the racetrack. Next, he just needed to wait for Tony to get back to him. Looking at the time, Su Xing yawned. It was still early. As a positive and hard-working employee, it seemed he could only go home and rest. Time flew by. Tony had arrived at the interrogation room. The guard at the door, seeing Tony, saluted him with admiration. Tony forced a smile and patted the guard's shoulder. He entered the interrogation room under the guard's excited gaze. Looking at Ivan, who had his back to the door, the smile on Tony's face had disappeared. Ever since dealing with Ivan's matter, he had been restless. Su Xing's words kept replaying in his mind. His purpose in coming here was to verify Su Xing's words through Ivan. If it was true, then the implications would be too significant. His father had once formed an enmity with Ivan's father due to some events. More importantly, was his father really a founder of S.H.I.E.L.D? And Su Xing? Was his purpose really to welcome him back to inherit S.H.I.E.L.D? Tony dared not think too deeply. He took a deep breath, adjusted his mindset, and said to Ivan, "Why did you do all this?" Hearing Tony's voice, Ivan didn't even turn his head. You don't know? After what your father did, you still come and ask me. Right. For people like you. Why would you remember people like us? Listening to Ivan's mockery, Tony froze in place. Are you talking about the time my father expelled your father? Ivan's hair fell over his face, concealing his gaze. Listening to Tony's words, he scoffed disdainfully. Seeing Ivan's attitude, Tony, having received his answer, was somewhat at a loss. Looking at the disheveled Ivan in front of him, Tony, suddenly receiving so much information, was completely bewildered. Involving his father, a flustered Tony lost his usual confidence. Tony, who was always eloquent, didn't know what to say at this moment. After a long pause, he only managed to say, I will investigate the facts and compensate you accordingly. Then, he frantically placed his hand on the doorknob, preparing to leave. Before Tony could exert force, Ivan's mocking voice came from behind him. I don't need compensation from a dying man. Hearing Ivan's words, Tony gripped the doorknob tightly. He slowly turned his head in disbelief, meeting Ivan's gaze, who was looking at him with one eye. Dying from palladium poisoning is very painful. This compensation is enough. After saying that, Ivan turned his head back. Tony adjusted his flustered state of mind. He pushed open the door and left in a hurry. The threat of palladium poisoning. How did he know? What was his father's relationship with Ivan's family? At this moment, Tony desperately wanted to know the whole story. Was he really the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. who had been living outside? At this moment, Ivan smiled contentedly, hearing Tony leave. Then he began to ponder again about what happened at the racetrack. Why did those race cars behave that way? Why? Why can't I solve these problems? After coming out of the interrogation room, Tony turned and entered the restroom. Thinking about Ivan's words, Tony took out the detection device he had made and placed his hand on it. Watching the soaring values, Tony's heart tightened even further. What Su Xing said was right. Currently, without a replacement element, as long as Tony uses the armor, the metal toxins in his body will increase. Inside the restroom, there was no one else besides Tony. After breaking free from his busy state, the discomfort in Tony's body gradually spread throughout him. Feeling the discomfort in his body, Tony recalled Su Xing's reason for seeking him out. I can solve your palladium poisoning problem. Thinking of this, Tony no longer hesitated. The most important thing now was to contact Su Xing and solve his palladium poisoning problem first. As for what he said about being the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Tony gritted his teeth. For his own safety, what's wrong with inheriting S.H.I.E.L.D.? Besides, based on the rating that could classify Su Xing as a high-level agent, S.H.I.E.L.D. was most likely completely infiltrated and full of spies. The current director could keep it running, but what did that mean? Did it mean the current director was very capable? No, it wasn't. On the contrary, if it was full of spies, even if you didn't manage the entire S.H.I.E.L.D., it would most likely run itself. As for missions, spies would actively seek out missions to do. After thinking through this major concern, Tony immediately contacted Happy. At this moment, Happy was sitting in the car with 2 cheeseburgers beside him, waiting for Tony's instructions. Happy. Hearing Tony's voice coming from inside the car, Happy was startled at first, then accepted the reality. Having a high IQ, invention-loving boss was not uncommon. Realizing what was happening, Happy scanned the car, trying to find where the sound device was hidden. After finding nothing, Happy could only speak to the air. Sir, is there something you need? Quickly contact that S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who calls himself Su. Happy paused, listening to Tony's words. Now. This direct command completely flustered Happy. Happy hesitated, stammering. But, sir, you tore up that business card earlier. Listening to Happy's reply, Tony paused. Because he was in too much of a hurry, he really hadn't paid attention to that matter. Tony stopped abruptly. Has he contacted you again on his own? No, sir. Tony took a breath. Since his goal was to recruit him into S.H.I.E.L.D. No, it was to make him inherit S.H.I.E.L.D. Then he certainly wouldn't give up so easily. From his perspective, Ivan's appearance also confirmed his words. He would definitely invite him again. Or should he wait a bit longer? Tony looked at himself in the mirror, his fingers unconsciously tapping on the sink. Feeling the discomfort in his body, he suddenly looked up and met his own gaze in the mirror. No, he couldn't wait. Although the toxins in his body hadn't reached a rapidly fatal level yet, they could be slightly alleviated with some antidotes. Waiting until tomorrow wouldn't be a problem. But having grown up with almost everything coming easily to him, aside from his father's companionship, Tony didn't want to wait at all. Those antidotes tasted really bad. What's more, these antidotes couldn't eliminate the palladium poisoning problem. Since there was a way to solve this problem once and for all, why use these temporary methods? Inside the car, feeling Tony's silence, Happy relaxed, opened his mouth, and wanted to confirm if Tony was still there. Sir? See, contact the racetrack for me. Before Happy could finish calling out, Tony's voice came again. The sudden sound startled him again. Happy, can you hear me? Contact the racetrack for me. Listening to Tony's urging, Happy immediately replied, Yes, sir. What are we doing? I need to contact that S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, quickly. Hearing Tony's demand, although he had accompanied Tony for many years, Happy still felt that Tony was a bit willful at this moment. Sir, are we going to look for it now? Those fragments might have already been swept into the trash. They're in the trash now. I don't think contacting him this way will be very successful. Tony's voice came. Then did you memorize the contact information? Happy paused, a bit confused, and no. Then do you have any other way? Happy no longer argued. No, sir. Then hurry up. Time waits for no one. Time flew by. At Stark Enterprises, Pepper Potts, who was handling affairs, looked up at the clock on the wall, feeling inexplicably worried. Tony's previous unusual behavior still lingered in her mind. And then she thought about the accident Tony had at the racetrack. Pepper Potts's worry for Tony grew with time. What time was it already? Had something happened while he was meeting Ivan? Black Widow, disguised as a secretary nearby, saw Pepper's distracted look and put down what she was doing. She then handed a cup of coffee to Pepper. Seeing the coffee suddenly appear in front of her, Pepper, who had been lost in worry, came to her senses. She looked at Black Widow beside her and gave a sweet smile. Thank you. As a top agent, Black Widow thoughtfully said, Do you need me to contact Mr. Stark? Listening to Black Widow's words, Pepper hesitated for a moment. Seeing Pepper's hesitant expression, Black Widow continued, The important matters have been dealt with, and the remaining things won't take much time. Listening to Black Widow's guiding words, Pepper Potts finally nodded. Let me contact him. Seeing Pepper's trust in her increase, Black Widow smiled and then began to handle things. Turning around, the expression on Black Widow's face also disappeared, replaced by her usual coldness. Deepening trust wasn't the main point. The main point was that she also wanted to know Tony's current situation. Limited by her identity as a secretary, she couldn't directly gather information on Tony. These things should have been accomplished by Su Xing, but the problem was Su Xing. Opening the window and looking at Su Xing's communication with her, Black Widow felt a bit helpless. Remember to give my business card to Pepper and have her pass it to Tony. When the time comes, you'll know. Glancing at the time, Black Widow's trust in Su Xing gradually faded. Counting the time, it seemed like it was almost his quitting time, wasn't it? She thought he just wanted to slack off for the day, didn't he? The thought of a whole day of mission time being wasted by Su Xing's words made Black Widow feel a burst of irritation. The time had come, but with this progress, if she didn't take the initiative to do something, Tony might never think of this matter again in his life. Just as Black Widow was internally complaining about Su Xing, Pepper's voice suddenly caught her ear. Say again, where are you? What are you doing at the racetrack? Looking for a torn business card? What is he up to now? Black Widow looked at her chat history with Su Xing again. You'll know when the time comes. Listening to Pepper's voice, Black Widow's heart was filled with questions. Find a torn business card? It seemed Mr. Stark had only torn Su Xing's business card backstage, right? Black Widow's complaints about Su Xing had turned into confusion. Is this right? Didn't Tony personally tear up that business card earlier? Why did he suddenly want to find that business card again in such a short time? Could it be related to the person holding the strange weapon? Before Black Widow could think further, Pepper's voice once again caught her attention. Why didn't you try to stop him? Backstage at the racetrack, Happy listened to Pepper's voice on the phone, his face full of bitterness. I tried, but it was no use. Then, without waiting for Pepper to reply, he tucked the phone between his neck and shoulder. He said to the racetrack cleaner in front of him. Are you sure it hasn't been disposed of? The cleaner shook his head. Happy? Happy. Happy gestured for the cleaner to help him search, while picking up the phone again. I'm here. Why is he looking for this business card? Pepper Potts keenly sensed that something was amiss. Although Tony sometimes acted like a child, he wouldn't do meaningless things without reason. Facing Pepper's inquiry on the other end of the phone, Happy stopped what he was doing. Regarding Pepper, Tony had explicitly instructed him not to let her know about his life-threatening health issues. After thinking for a moment, Happy said, I don't know either. Listening to Happy's reply, Pepper Potts was very dissatisfied with the answer. Are you hiding something from me, Happy? Looking at the fragments found by the cleaner in front of him, Happy gave an okay gesture, indicating they had found the right ones. Then he held the phone to his ear. How could that be? How could Mr. Stark have anything important to hide from you? You better explain it properly to me. The key to this problem is finding the key to this problem. Before Pepper could get angry, Happy saw an incoming call from Tony, as if granted a great pardon. He quickly said to Pepper, Mr. Stark is calling. I'll take it first. Wait. Without giving Pepper a chance to speak, Happy immediately transferred to Tony's call. At Tony's home at this moment, Tony was in his lab, accessing internal surveillance footage from Stark Enterprises. Through advanced technology, Tony was analyzing Su Xing, who was wearing a suit in the footage, trying to find a way to contact him. How are things progressing? We found a few fragments, sir. Looking at Su Xing in the camera, Tony was extremely anxious, and he glanced at a cup of dark liquid next to him. After a few seconds, Tony asked again, Is it put back together? Happy, who was diligently searching for fragments, looked up from the trash can. No, sir, not yet. Listening to Happy, an anxious Tony licked his lips. Finally, he sighed. He picked up the cup of liquid, closed his eyes, and drank it. Putting down the cup, feeling the bitterness in his mouth, Tony felt a hint of regret. If only his memory wasn't so good. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lost his temper and torn up that business card. Tony picked up another glass of red wine and took a sip to get rid of the bitterness in his mouth. No way. It was all his own fault for being too smart. Not only did he remember Su Xing, but he also remembered Carlson, whom he had only met once, so clearly. Now look, not only did he tear Su Xing's business card, he didn't keep the business card of the person who called himself Carlson either. Just as Tony was being narcissistic, the cleaner who was searching for fragments stopped and looked at Happy. A puzzled Happy looked back at him. I'm off work. This is already past my working hours. Happy's eyes were full of envy. I want to get off work too. Listening to the cleaner, Happy immediately reported the news to Tony. Sir, it might take a little longer. The cleaner says he's going off duty. Hearing the word off duty, Tony's movements paused, directly triggering his PTSD. Off duty? What off duty? Who's off duty? Feeling the lingering bitterness in his mouth, Tony was gradually getting agitated. He'd already drunk the medicine. Wouldn't it be a loss if he didn't find it? Tell him I'll pay for the overtime, and have him keep working. Receiving Tony's instructions, Happy conveyed his meaning to the cleaner. Upon hearing about overtime pay, the cleaner shrugged, muttering to himself, and continued working. Meanwhile, at Stark Enterprises, Pepper, unable to reach Happy, called out a few times to no avail, then angrily hung up the phone. Seeing the call disconnected, Black Widow no longer waited. Using the action of refilling coffee as an excuse, she casually asked, Has something happened? Pepper Potts sighed, a helpless look in her eyes, and looked at Black Widow, who was disguised as a secretary. Nothing. You're really lucky to be my secretary. If you were his secretary, you'd have to expend too much energy. Black Widow placed the refilled coffee cup in front of Pepper. Is that so? I think I can handle it. Pepper Potts took a sip of coffee and shook her head. Then, what if he suddenly wants to find a business card that has already been torn to shreds? Hearing this, Black Widow immediately feigned remembering. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Someone gave me this business card today and asked me to pass it on to you. I got busy with work and forgot. Listening to Black Widow, Pepper Potts surprisingly took the business card handed to her. Looking at the S.H.I.E.L.D abbreviation on it, Pepper Potts immediately thought of the business card Carlson had given her earlier. Although Tony had taken it and torn it up later, Pepper still had a deep impression of the name. Looking at the business card, Pepper didn't hesitate and called Tony directly. In the lab at the mansion, Tony saw Pepper's incoming call and immediately answered. Then he felt a bit guilty. He was too anxious and forgot to tell Pepper about his situation. Connecting the call, Tony thought about how to start the conversation appropriately. Just as he was about to speak, Pepper's voice came through. "I have a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent's business card here. Is this what you're looking for?" Hearing Pepper's voice, Tony suddenly straightened up. Really? He completely ignored the question of how Pepper knew about this. After getting a positive reply, Tony immediately called Happy. At this very moment, backstage at the racetrack, Happy, who had already gathered the number fragments, was carefully piecing them together. Looking at the clear, though wrinkled, numbers, Happy was extremely excited. Feeling his phone vibrate, Happy immediately answered the call. However, before Happy could speak, Tony's voice came through. "No need to search anymore. I've already got the business card." Listening to the sound of the call disconnecting, Happy's smile from piecing together the fragments still lingered on his face. The cleaner next to him looked over. "What about the overtime pay?" Happy's mood worsened. In an inconspicuous house in New York City, Su Xing was watching a news report about the lightning whip inheritor on TV. As the video shows, the weapon in the man's hand poses a significant threat. The man has been apprehended by Iron Man and is currently under control. Furthermore, according to expert investigation, the powerful equipment used by the man is very similar to the core technology used in Tony Stark armor. This contradicts what Tony Stark said at the previous hearing. The technology cannot be surpassed within 20 years. Below is the relevant video footage from the hearing. Su Xing, sitting on the sofa, turned off the TV and then lay down on the sofa. Looking at the white ceiling, Su Xing felt a strange sense of unreality. Why did he always return home after finishing a task? It was like a save point. The moment he thought that this was just a random resting spot for him, the sense of a save file became even stronger. This wasn't because the system stipulated that he could only return home after getting off work. Not long after he transmigrated, after a period of adjustment, Su Xing had figured out most of the system's rules. At first, Su Xing was very excited when he learned that his identity was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. But when a flood of memories surged into his mind, especially after personally experiencing that his predecessor had died on a mission, Su Xing immediately wanted to resign and find another job. However, as soon as Su Xing had this thought, the system issued a warning. Looking at the note that read, "S.H.I.E.L.D. automatically bound," Su Xing couldn't help but sigh with emotion as he recalled his naive self. If it weren't for the original owner's identity as an agent of the 8th level, he wouldn't have been sure for a while whether he belonged to S.H.I.E.L.D. or HYDRA. The good news was that he was very certain he was from S.H.I.E.L.D. The bad news was that, according to what he understood, it seemed he was the only S.H.I.E.L.D. agent in the entire armed agent department. As for the criteria for getting off work, the system was quite lenient. As long as he didn't handle or advance work-related tasks after hours, strictly speaking, it didn't count as working. Because of this, it greatly reduced the difficulty for Su Xing to get off work. After all, he couldn't just disappear without a trace the moment it was time to get off work, could he? Su Xing was certain. If that were the case, he wouldn't need Fury to suspect him. He himself would feel like a spy. After sighing, Su Xing checked the time. HM. Very good. It was almost time to get off work. Looking at the silent communicator, Su Xing clicked his tongue. Why hadn't Tony contacted him yet? Given Tony's temper, he shouldn't be able to hold back like this, should he? However, before Su Xing could think further, the communicator in front of him suddenly rang. He clicked accept, and before Su Xing could speak, Tony's anxious voice came through. "Su, is that you?" At this moment, in Tony's underground research lab at home, Tony excitedly watched the call connect. Having waited for a long time, Tony impatiently asked a series of questions. What exactly did my father do back then? Was S.H.I.E.L.D. really founded by my father? If this is true, why did S.H.I.E.L.D. only contact me now? What is the method to solve the reactor's side effects? What is all this about? Listening to Tony's continuous questions, Su Xing smiled, finding it strangely amusing. He had never seen Tony so flustered in the movies. Heh, This was the perfect time to tease the newly debuted Tony. Otherwise, after Tony experienced a few major events, a more mature Tony wouldn't be as impulsive as he was now. After Tony finished speaking, Su Xing slowly began. No rush, Mr. Stark. Take your time. There's still plenty of time. I will answer your questions one by one. In the research lab, Tony calmed himself down. All right. First question. What exactly did my father do back then, and why was I suddenly attacked? Tell me, was my father the perpetrator back then? Hearing Tony ask this question, Su Xing was initially a little surprised. According to normal logic, shouldn't Tony have first asked how to solve the palladium poisoning problem? Thinking of this, Su Xing subtly hinted, Mr. Stark, shouldn't you be more concerned about yourself first? Tony's voice came back. Right now, I'm most concerned about my father's issue. I need to confirm that my father didn't owe anyone anything. After a pause, Tony said, besides, didn't you say there's still plenty of time? Listening to Tony's words, Su Xing, who had intended to tease Tony, suddenly got stuck. Since you put it that way, yes. No rush. I will definitely answer all your questions during working hours. Clearing his throat, Su Xing began to answer Tony's first question. Don't worry, Mr. Stark, your father has no issues whatsoever. The person who attacked you is named Ivan, and his father is Ivan Vanko. The energy source he used was something your father participated in designing back then. The other person is his father, Ivan Vanko. Although your father's actions back then were somewhat inappropriate, it was also Ivan Vanko's own request. His own request? Tony leaned his hands on the table in the research lab, somewhat puzzled. Listening to Tony's full attention on this call, Su Xing replied, You know, Mr. Stark, as geniuses, they all have their own pride. From his perspective, you would also proudly view this as charity, especially when he had just made a groundbreaking discovery. Due to your father's obstruction, Ivan Vanko blamed all the problems on your father. Listening to Su Xing's explanation, Tony's heart also settled. Su Xing was right. If it were him, he probably wouldn't accept this help either. After resolving this issue, Tony breathed a sigh of relief, taking his hands off the table. Then, Tony crossed his arms, covering his mouth with one hand. Having discussed so much, Tony became even more curious about his father's affairs. Thinking that there was still plenty of time, Tony opened his mouth and still asked the question, My father, is he really the founder of S.H.I.E.L.D? Hearing this answer, Su Xing raised an eyebrow. If it were before, he would have definitely urged Tony to make a decision. He would also help Tony seize Fury's position and let Tony take charge. But now, it was fine if he had to work overtime after taking charge. But he wanted him to watch others get off work. In comparison, Fury's one-eyed face seemed amiable. Su Xing said, strictly speaking, yes. But, more so as a technical consultant. Hearing that Su Xing didn't mention inheriting the mess of S.H.I.E.L.D. again, Tony's heart finally relaxed completely. Seeing that both questions had been resolved, a relaxed Tony finally turned his attention to himself. He asked the most crucial question, how do I solve my palladium poisoning problem? Su Xing's voice came through. It's very simple, you just need… Hey, wait a moment. Tony, whose curiosity was thoroughly piqued, urged, What? What do I just need? It's time to get off work. I'll tell you tomorrow when I'm back on duty. In the research lab, Tony, full of anticipation, froze for a moment when he heard Su Xing's words. What did you say? Su Xing's voice was devoid of emotion. I'm off work. We'll talk about work-related matters tomorrow. Didn't you say it was still early? I did, but didn't I just finish explaining your father's problem, and now there's no time? Tony in the research lab was momentarily speechless with anger. Don't worry. I'll tell you in detail when I'm at work tomorrow, Mr. Stark. Don't overthink it. Get a good night's sleep. I'll contact you after I start work. Listening to Su Xing's calm words, Tony now really wanted to grab him by the head and force him to spill it. Get a good night's sleep? If it were you, could you sleep? Tony quickly shouted into the phone. No, you have to tell me. Didn't I say I'd tell you when I'm at work tomorrow? I hope you can understand. Understand? Understand your neighbor Miss Susan's apple pie. I understand you, but you should at least understand me. Tony, fuming with anger, suddenly felt something was off. How could he just happen to be off work exactly when he asked that question? You little brat, you're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Thinking of this, Tony gritted his teeth and said, You're doing this on purpose? I, as the son of the founder of S.H.I.E.L.D, command you. Tell me, how to solve the palladium poisoning problem. Hearing Tony's threat, Su Xing narrowed his eyes. Mr. Stark, besides science, you should also care about humanities. With my support, you are the heir of S.H.I.E.L.D. Otherwise, how will you convince others? Tony gasped. He forced himself to calm down. Then he said through gritted teeth, Su, please address me as agent. Su Xing was playing the part. Listening to Su Xing's words, Tony suppressed the urge to curse and softened his tone. You wanted me to be director before. Su Xing scoffed. Sorry, someone offered a higher price. For your own good, don't mention that identity again. Tony couldn't control himself and shouted directly. I don't understand humanities. Do you know who Akumulov is? The irony is you, this damned chameleon. Su Xing replied faintly. Sorry. In my country, there's a proverb. The struggle between sons of princes has always been like this. English can't express the original meaning. I think you'll have to look it up yourself, Mr. Stark. Before Tony could argue with Su Xing again, Su Xing directly interrupted him. Don't call me again, Mr. Stark. I'm afraid the current director will misunderstand. Then he directly hung up the phone, ending the confrontation. Hello? Hello? Who wants to be this broken director of S.H.I.E.L.D? You should at least tell me how to solve the problem. Listening to the silence on the other end of the phone, Tony angrily slammed the experimental table. This damned bastard. With that jolt, the incomplete armor fragments on the experimental table immediately lost control and flew around. Tony quickly turned and dodged. After flying around for a while, they directly flew onto Tony's hand. Tony, who hadn't stood firm, was directly pulled down by the hand armor. Although the time had not yet come, the anti-Tony armor was already taking shape. Watching your experiment process is truly very interesting, sir. Listening to Jarvis's emotionless sarcasm, Tony became even more furious. He removed the hand armor, wanting to throw it directly to the ground, but then he was afraid the armor would go out of control. So, bristling with anger, he gently placed the armor on the ground. It was like a Hulk so angry he couldn't stand it, yet still only able to thread a needle in the dim light. Call him again. Receiving the command, Jarvis began dialing the contact information left on Su Xing's business card. After a few calls, listening to Jarvis's cold report, Tony was even more infuriated. To be fair, although Tony was just starting out at this time, his playboy temperament was still somewhat present. But it wasn't enough to make him this angry. That was how it was supposed to be. But after Su Xing's back and forth, Tony's curiosity had been completely piqued. It would have been fine if Su Xing hadn't answered his other questions. The problem was, he clearly knew the answer to this question, but he just wouldn't tell you. That was a bit infuriating. What was it like? It was like watching a suspense movie. At first, you found it a bit boring. But as the plot developed, you were already hooked. Just as the killer was about to be revealed, it suddenly ended. Directors like that should die? At this moment, Tony felt exactly like this. Especially since this also concerned his life safety. According to the current rate of poisoning, Tony's antidote could theoretically maintain his life safety and allow him to comfortably avoid the reactor's side effects. Of course, the premise was that he would die in 7 days. Seeing that he couldn't contact Su Xing, Tony became even more anxious. At this moment, Pepper's voice came through. Tony, are you okay? Listening to Pepper's message, Tony, though angry, still suppressed his irritation and asked, When did she call? Just when you were attacked by the armor you developed. Feeling the sarcasm in Jarvis's tone, Tony took a deep breath and massaged his temples. Call her back. At Stark Enterprises. Pepper's eyes lit up when the call connected. Ever since she gave Tony Su Xing's contact information from the business card, he had been silent. A worried Pepper Potts spoke directly into the phone. Is everything going smoothly? Black Widow beside her also pricked up her ears, listening to their conversation. At this moment, Black Widow had suppressed the doubts in her heart. No matter why Su Xing made Tony change his mind, at least the mission was progressing. Black Widow, who once again had expectations for Su Xing, listened intently. So much time had passed. The two had probably already talked, and Tony might have already joined S.H.I.E.L.D. No, not smoothly. I can't reach him now. He said he's off work. Pepper froze for a moment, a little disbelieving, and repeated. He's off work. Black Widow, eavesdropping, heard this and unconsciously clenched the mission report in her hand, her pupils dilating. He's off work. At this moment, Tony sat on the ground, gradually calming down. No choice. Since he couldn't be reached, although he was incredibly anxious internally, it seemed he would just have to wait until tomorrow. Wait for this S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, the elite responsible for protecting the country's safety, to start work. Just as Tony was sulking, Pepper's voice came through again. Are you very anxious to contact them? Listening to Pepper's concern, Tony's tone softened. To keep Pepper from worrying, Tony said something he didn't mean. No, I still have Coulson's contact information from the first time we met. Tony immediately perked up. What? Didn't I tear up his business card? Black Widow at Stark Enterprises was even more confused. That's right. Didn't Tony reject Coulson's help? Otherwise, Nick Fury wouldn't have sent her here. Pepper had a look of, I knew it all along. I wrote down his contact information, just in case. Really, I love you so much. Listening to Tony's excited voice, although Pepper knew Tony didn't mean it that way, she still felt a little happy. I'll give you his contact information right now. You've really helped a lot. Jarvis, remind me to dock Happy's pay. Looking at Pepper's actions, Black Widow was somewhat at a loss. Logically speaking, an Agent Level 8's mission was not allowed to be known by anyone other than higher-ranking personnel. But faced with the current situation, Black Widow didn't know how to calculate it anymore. If she stopped it, Su Xing was already off work. What if she missed the chance to recruit Tony? At this moment, Tony had already obtained Coulson's contact information and began to contact him. Meanwhile, at Su Xing's home, Su Xing was looking at today's gains, planning his next steps. He had completely forgotten about Tony's matter. Information that is too easily obtained is often not cherished. It would be just fine to talk about it tomorrow. Besides, what could Tony do, no matter how anxious he was? He couldn't sue him, could he? New Mexico. Coulson took the researcher's report, his expression serious. Flipping through the investigation files, Coulson's brows gradually furrowed. Then he looked at the hammer in the center of the laboratory with a strange expression. From the moment he received this assignment, the entire mission had been a mystery. The researcher's tests couldn't find the same material anywhere on Earth. Since S.H.I.E.L.D. took over this mission, days had passed. Yet, there was no progress in the research. Looking at the seemingly ordinary hammer in the center of the site, Coulson's brows were tightly knit. Such a simple hammer, yet why was it impossible to move it even a little bit by any means? Like Su Xing, he was among the few in S.H.I.E.L.D. whose status was second only to Fury and Agent Hill. As an old agent who had worked at S.H.I.E.L.D. for many years, he was increasingly aware that too many changes had occurred in the world recently. The Hulk rampaging in New York City, and the appearance of more monsters. And now, this inexplicable hammer. Coulson sighed, feeling troubled by the lack of progress in the work. Thinking about this, he recalled the idea Fury had told him in his mind. We need people like Tony Stark. Relying solely on us is not enough to face the increasing threats. At this moment, Coulson increasingly agreed with Fury's idea. But as soon as he thought of Tony Stark's attitude, he felt a wave of confusion. Although the mission was no longer under his jurisdiction, Coulson still felt a sense of bewilderment. After all, he was saved by S.H.I.E.L.D.'s people. But why did he have such an attitude towards S.H.I.E.L.D.? This man didn't know how to be grateful. Even if such a playboy were recruited into S.H.I.E.L.D., could he truly bear the responsibility of a hero? He gently shook his head, casting the thought aside. He refocused his attention on the current mission. Never mind. Anyway, this mission had now been handed over to Su Xing. Although Tony Stark had some opinions about S.H.I.E.L.D., but facing a direct recruitment from his savior, he must have agreed by now, right? Just as Coulson was about to arrange the mission, a contact request appeared directly in Coulson's ear. Looking at the number displayed on the screen, Coulson's expression began to change. This number, is it Tony Stark's? After using his memory to identify the person associated with this number, Coulson was momentarily confused about what was going on. Didn't he used to be very resistant to S.H.I.E.L.D? Why was he contacting them proactively now? Even if he was contacting them, Su Xing was the one executing this mission. Why would he contact him? Coulson, his mind unclear, looked at the flashing notification and still chose to answer. Although according to S.H.I.E.L.D. regulations, Level 8 agents were classified as top-secret black box, only allowed to know their own responsible parts, and absolutely forbidden from knowing the secrets of other Level 8 to 9 agents. But since Tony Stark initiated contact, something must have happened. Furthermore, this mission was halfway transferred to Su Xing. It wasn't a big problem for him to know. Coulson optimistically estimated. Perhaps Tony had suddenly changed his mind and wanted to join S.H.I.E.L.D. The call connected. Coulson replied politely. "Mr. Stark, is that you?" After a brief silence, Tony's voice came through. "Tell me, since you both belong to S.H.I.E.L.D., why didn't you leave work with him?" Question mark. Listening to Tony's words, it was now Coulson's turn to be silent. In the laboratory, Tony looked at the connected call, his eyes also slightly confused. After excitedly initiating the contact, listening to Jarvis announce the call, a slightly calmer Tony quickly realized something. As an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., since Su Xing could leave work, then Coulson might also have left work. Upon realizing this problem, Tony's excited mood gradually faded. What Tony hadn't expected was, Coulson actually answered. Listening to the voice on the other end, Tony was silent for a moment. He couldn't quite understand how S.H.I.E.L.D. operated internally. As a secret organization, could such a structure still carry out missions? This for the entire country. Thinking of this, Tony suddenly froze. Was he hesitating between national security and his own life? Tony, who had figured it out, slapped himself directly. "I'm truly a scumbag. How could I be distracted by national security? S.H.I.E.L.D. can do whatever it wants. My own safety is the top priority." And on the other end of the phone, Coulson put the research data in his hand aside, then grasped the railing and began to ponder. A very good question, making his brain spin. But before Coulson could spin out anything, Tony, with a clear goal, directly interrupted his thoughts. "Whatever. Tell me, how do I solve my palladium poisoning problem?" Listening to Tony's words, the shock in Coulson's brain expanded further. "You have palladium poisoning. When did that happen?" "No one told me when I took the mission." But Coulson was an old agent after all. As a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who had seen many storms, facing such a massive and inexplicable problem, Coulson still found a relatively reasonable explanation in his mind. The news of Tony's palladium poisoning must have been provided by Black Widow. After all, he had contacted Tony too early. Black Widow hadn't infiltrated yet at that time. It was normal for him not to know. Thinking of this, Coulson, gradually clearing his thoughts, steadied himself. But another problem arose. How to solve the palladium poisoning problem? Are you asking me? Coulson, completely clueless, could only try to appease Tony. "We are currently cracking this problem, and we already have corresponding results." What are the results? Facing Tony's relentless pursuit, Coulson could only resort to corporate jargon to delay him. On the other hand, he quickly contacted Black Widow. At Stark Enterprises at this moment, Black Widow, who was working with Pepper, saw Coulson's message and her heart tightened. What did that guy Su Xing tell Tony? How did this matter involve her? At the same time, Coulson was still talking nonsense. The result is, we already have relevant research plans, and we have grasped the key to solving this problem. Listening to Coulson's nonsense, Tony was directly enraged. "So, dragging me along is your S.H.I.E.L.D's excellent tradition, is it? One says he's off work. One is here talking nonsense. Is this matter very interesting? Stop talking nonsense to me. Just tell me, what is the specific solution?" Facing Tony's rage, Coulson saw Black Widow's reply and breathed a sigh of relief. He immediately threw the question over, then confidently waited for Black Widow's reply. But what he didn't know was, at Stark Enterprises, looking at the message Coulson sent, Black Widow's beautiful eyes were suddenly filled with shock. "What is the method to solve Tony Stark's palladium poisoning?" "What is it?" "Tony has palladium poisoning." "How come I don't know?" "New Mexico. In the laboratory specifically built for studying Thor's hammer." Carlson, one of the mission's supervisors, held his phone, waiting for something. A few seconds later, seeing Black Widow's unresponsive reply, Carlson couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Meanwhile, at Stark Enterprises, looking at the message Carlson sent, Black Widow instantly felt that things were a bit inexplicable. She was trying her best to digest the information, attempting to sort out the logic of the entire situation. At this moment, Carlson's urge message arrived. "You don't know about Tony's palladium poisoning?" Black Widow looked at the message, even more at a loss. Should I know? She had just infiltrated. It was only her first day. She wasn't a miracle doctor who could tell Tony's illness with a glance. Facing Carlson's urging, Black Widow's hand unconsciously paused. Pepper Potts, who was using Black Widow's work process as background noise, keenly noticed Black Widow's abnormality. Looking at Black Widow's stopped hands, Pepper felt a little confused. Her new secretary was very capable. She shouldn't be encountering difficulties at work. What's wrong? Hearing Pepper's voice, Black Widow immediately reacted. Looking at Pepper's questioning gaze, Black Widow immediately pretended to be at ease. "Nothing. I'm just thinking about which plan is better." Pepper, at the desk, heard Black Widow's reply and showed a gentle smile. "You've worked hard." Black Widow returned an embarrassed smile. Then she turned her attention to Carlson's message, calmed down, and began to analyze. How did Carlson know about the palladium poisoning? Recalling Tony's hasty contact with Carlson, it wasn't difficult to conclude that Tony must have brought it up. Tony wouldn't reveal this problem to S.H.I.E.L.D. without reason. Could it be that? A flash of inspiration struck Black Widow's mind, and a charming smile appeared on her lips. "I understand. This must have been Su Xing who told Tony. So, the irresistible reason you mentioned was this." As for why Su Xing knew this information, she didn't delve deeper. As the first person to interact with Tony, it was normal for Su Xing to know some information. Anyway, it didn't delay the completion of the mission. There was nothing worth pursuing. At Su Xing's home at this moment, Su Xing was watching the news, collecting various reports about superheroes. As a Marvel enthusiast, although Su Xing knew a little about every hero, when it came to the timeline, Su Xing lost his advantage. No choice. This blame could only be placed on Marvel's official. Due to various reasons and the dispersed authors, all the stories, if strictly viewed, couldn't be separated at all. Therefore, Su Xing had to rely on his identity as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent to collect information on various heroes. Over time, this became Su Xing's habit. Just as Su Xing was diligently collecting intelligence, several messages caught his attention. Black Widow's message. Su Xing wasn't surprised at all. At this time, she probably knew he was off work and came to demand an explanation. Clicking on the communication, just as he was about to send the excuse he had prepared, the message in front of him made Su Xing a little dumbfounded. Well done. He really couldn't refuse this reason. Reason? Su Xing was a little confused. With Tony having installed an anti-reconnaissance system, and on the premise that he would absolutely not inform Pepper, what reason did Black Widow know? Looking at Black Widow's message, Su Xing hesitated for a moment. Unable to directly ask, he could only fully utilize the art of language. Good in what way? Black Widow raised an eyebrow. Then she sent the message she had edited for Carlson to Su Xing, adding a few more sentences. You directly negotiate with Tony using the palladium poisoning problem. Use this to recruit him into S.H.I.E.L.D. This plan is indeed feasible. However, next time, you still need to inform me of the plan's details in advance. Also, let me know when you're off work in the future to avoid delaying the mission progress. Looking at the message from Black Widow, Su Xing froze on the spot. This plan was feasible, but his goal was to gain Tony's trust, not to directly recruit him. Besides, how did you even know about Tony's palladium poisoning? Looking at Black Widow's message, Su Xing, unable to expose himself, could only force himself to send a reply. Haha. Next time, it won't happen. At the same time, Carlson in New Mexico also received a message from Black Widow. Looking at Black Widow's Su Xing plan, Carlson couldn't help but sigh. This plan is brilliant. As expected of him. With this information, Tony would definitely. Although he usually liked to leave work on time. No matter what. He didn't delay anything, did he? At this very moment, Tony on the other side was already impatient. Why did it get stuck as soon as this issue was brought up? Was S.H.I.E.L.D. playing with him? Although this reason sounded absurd, Tony felt that any reason, when applied to S.H.I.E.L.D., didn't seem absurd at all. Leaving work on time, plotting rebellion. What couldn't S.H.I.E.L.D. agents do? Thinking of this, Tony gritted his teeth. He immediately started a barrage of words into the phone. Speak. Do you or do you not know the solution? If it weren't for you guys, I wouldn't have palladium poisoning at all. If you don't come up with a solution, this matter isn't over. Listening to Tony's outburst, Carlson, who had just finished praising Su Xing, froze in place. Facing Tony's questioning, Carlson, who secretly admired Su Xing, frowned. He was already dissatisfied with Tony's ingratitude. Now, hearing his complaints, Carlson couldn't bear it anymore and said in a cold voice, "Please get one thing straight, Mr. Stark. We were the ones who rescued you from the cave. If it weren't for our help, who knows what would have happened to you by now?" Hearing this, Tony, who was already fuming, immediately exploded. He directly started to retort. "Rescue? Did you rescue me? With your so-called elite agents? Did he save me?" Listening to Tony's condescending remarks, Carlson's tone also carried a restrained anger. "Mr. Stark, please do not question S.H.I.E.L.D.'s capabilities." Tony couldn't hold back even more. "Are you saying that the agent who rescued me after 3 attempts is very capable? What? Is this level considered high in S.H.I.E.L.D., right?" Just as Tony was going all out on this point, Carlson stopped his counterattack. Hiss. "Wait a minute. Rescued 3 times? Wait, let's talk in detail." In an ordinary apartment in New York City, in the living room of the house, Su Xing put down the Daily Bugle in his hand and fell into deep thought as he looked at the message Black Widow sent him on the computer. No, this is too wrong. How did Black Widow know the reason he told Tony? Su Xing crossed his hands, his eyes revealing disbelief. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s technology couldn't possibly surpass Tony's. That's really strange. Could it be that he underestimated Black Widow's ability to gather intelligence? Thinking of this, Su Xing felt a bit emotional, as expected of an agent of the 8th level. Terrifying. However, before Su Xing could think further about what to do next, another call came in again. Su Xing looked at the contact on the screen and immediately felt uneasy. Why was Carlson calling him? Shouldn't he be handling the Thor's Hammer mission right now? Without thinking much, Su Xing still answered the call. "Is there something you need from me?" Carlson's angry accusation came from the other end of the phone. "Su, explain to me what in the world is going on." Su Xing was full of doubts. What is going on? You know, I wouldn't normally question your work methods at all. But please tell me, did you delay the mission just because you were off work? Listening to Carlson's angry tone, Su Xing was a little confused. No. How did he know that he saved Tony and then went off work? Facing such a situation, Su Xing didn't even think and directly chose to deny it. He still vaguely remembered the content of the worker's handbook. The entire workplace is a dark forest. All colleagues are hunters with guns. Once they find that you dare to take responsibility, all problems will come to you. Listen, Carlson, this must be some kind of misunderstanding. I am dedicated to my work and regard the mission S.H.I.E.L.D. assigns me as more important than God. No matter how you heard these rumors, I ask you not to believe them. Recalling the reason he fabricated, Su Xing felt there were no flaws. He had, after all, spent so much time with Carlson. The image he had built up over so many days had been maintained until now. He would definitely have some trust in him, no matter what. In this situation, his own information must be more accurate. Otherwise, what else could he do? Could it be that Tony told him? Listening to Su Xing's sophistry, Carlson was almost laughing in anger. Is what Tony Stark himself said a rumor? Su Xing was immediately choked. Tony himself told you? How could he? Su Xing slapped his forehead. It's over. It must be that Tony couldn't reach him, so he contacted Carlson instead. Although he didn't know how the two got in touch. But it doesn't matter now. Feeling the silence on Su Xing's end, Carlson also stopped wasting words. Originally, he still wanted to hear Su Xing explain. After all, deep down, Carlson was unwilling to accept this fact. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s top agent saved someone halfway and then went off work. If this got out, could their S.H.I.E.L.D. still exist? The funds for future missions would probably have to be obtained by these agents performing on the streets themselves. Whether Fury knew about this matter or not. Just in case, he had to inform Fury. S.H.I.E.L.D. cannot be ruined in his hands. Thinking of this, Coulson stopped wasting words. Since this matter has been confirmed, the main problem now is to recruit Tony into S.H.I.E.L.D. So he directly asked, "Enough, you don't need to think of excuses anymore. Tell me, what is the solution to Tony's palladium poisoning?" On the other side, on the living room sofa, Su Xing, who immediately felt that something was wrong, his brain was working at high speed. Damn it. By no means, this matter was actually known by Coulson, this loyal old employee of S.H.I.E.L.D. He would definitely add a note about this to Fury. At that time, would he still be able to go off work as usual? Thinking of this, facing this situation, Su Xing, who was somewhat cornered, couldn't help but have a bold idea. You say? Otherwise, how about I join HYDRA? Anyway, it's already like this. Although he used to go off work on time, the missions he carried out were different after all. For Tony, who has now become Iron Man and the first choice for the Avengers in Fury's eyes, his 3 times saving Tony would definitely not be forgotten just like that. As for the system's restriction of binding to S.H.I.E.L.D., Su Xing thought for a moment. S.H.I.E.L.D. was originally infiltrated by Hydra like a sieve. If you really want to talk about it. For HYDRA, whose industry is distributed throughout the world, S.H.I.E.L.D. is just one of its branches. Politely call you S.H.I.E.L.D. Impolitely, even Fury works for HYDRA. Besides, he was, after all, an agent of the 8th level for many years. Fury definitely wouldn't fire him directly because of this, as long as he still had the title of a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent at that time. His joining Hydra might not necessarily trigger the system's judgment. Su Xing, whose brain was running at high speed, felt that his perspective had opened up. The thought of joining Hydra arose, and suddenly the world felt wide open. However, that being said, but Su Xing still did not refuse to cooperate with Coulson. After all, this plan still had too many instabilities. How to gain Hydra's trust is one thing. The system's judgment is another. What if the system is very sensitive and stipulates that he can only have the identity of a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent? At that time, if the system unbinds, wouldn't everything he did be a joke? For this situation, even if he wanted to join HYDRA, it would definitely have to be done slowly, with a long-term plan. After all, who would want to be an underground Hydra spy when they could be a respectable S.H.I.E.L.D. agent? And at this moment, Coulson's request also came. Tell me the method to cure Tony Stark's palladium poisoning. Su Xing pursed his lips. This definitely won't do. If he told him, what reason would he have to contact Tony again? Wouldn't his indispensability in this mission be gone? This situation must never happen. For this situation, Su Xing's side immediately played the little tune of the brain growing long. What does he have now that is irreplaceable? Isn't it the news of Tony's palladium poisoning? Realizing this, the music on Su Xing's side immediately disappeared. No. Coulson was stunned and had a guess. You don't know the solution? No, I know. If you know, why don't you say? Coulson was even more confused. Since you already know, I won't hide it from you anymore. I'm off work. You can talk about this tomorrow when I'm back at work. Listening to Su Xing's words, the same music played again on Coulson's side. My head is so itchy. I feel like I'm growing a brain.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.